Hello everyone, Al here at Automated Muscle in the Jack Buddha. Enjoying a Saturday morning ride here, listening to Interpol's 20th anniversary of Antics, the live set at the end of the album. It's awesome. Anyway, I thought what I'd do today is give listeners and viewers a little piece of candy, something to kind of chew on and try. Because after all, that's what this is all about, is experimentation and, trying things in your training to improve your skill set. All right, so what I'm going to do is explain to you the set of an exercise, how I would have somebody set up and prepare for an exercise. Now, much of what I'm about to go through, if you are a practitioner of high intensity training, have been, or especially a practitioner of super slow style high intensity training, this might make your ears bleed, sorry. It's gonna have to, I guess, because the blood pressure in your head is gonna get too high, because that's what you're gonna be concerned with after you listen to how I teach people to breathe. Anyway, but I will say with 100% confidence, what I'm about to give you is the most consistent approach with the laws of motor learning, what we know about the neurological aspects of training and the physiology involved. Okay? And if you wish to go back and read those texts to kind of piece together why I'm about to teach you what I'm teaching you, please do. Everyone benefits. So, let's just say you're in a chest press machine. Okay? Set it up for your settings, the ones that match the weight you're going to use on. And take a seat in the machine, kind of with intention. Don't just flop down in it. Just kind of lazily sitting down while thinking about other things is part of the behavior problem that we need to address with training. So, take a seat, set yourself in, make sure everything's correct. Let's just say it's a upright chest press machine. Get your butt cornered all the way back. Get your back against the back pad. Now, what you're going to do is use the machine's rigidity in that back pad as an analogy and a model for how you're going to set up your body. So, anyone who's trained on good equipment knows the better the piece of equipment is, the more the load feels like a heavy piece of air, because you don't feel friction, vibration, shitty articulations in the machine. You're not aware of all these little energy leakages in the machine system because the steel and the rigidity and the build is so good, right? That's what a good machine kind of consists of. So, if we are going to increase the load of something, the thing pushing against that load must become equally rigid, if not more so, to overcome the load. Right? So, what I'm about to teach you is how to turn your entire skeletal structure from feet to fingertips into those kind of steel frame of the machine. All right, so sit in the machine, mold your back to the back pad. If you need a head pad behind you because you have a forward head and neck posture, find it, but it's better if you can learn to do cervical retraction, because keeping the chin tucked back like this is probably the master cue of any exercise. Cervical retraction contracts a deep neck flexor musculature called the longus colli. And when that musculature contracts, it tracks the spinal column upwards. So it's pulling the spine rigid. All right. So if you're thinking of yourself as a puppet and your head's being pulled from the top, now everything below is being pulled straight down by gravity. Okay. So first and foremost, when we are setting our body up to do an exercise, we need a solid foundation. We need a steel pole that is driven into the ground, that is absolutely unforgivable and under any conditions. Now, the problem with strength exercise is that you, the subject, must do your best job at play acting that throughout a set of an exercise. So in the beginning, when you're learning exercises, your main job is to first learn how to not move the things that are supportive. Okay? And in the beginning, I would take this to an extreme. I would. Why? Because you're going to fall short. But it's the aim at that extreme that keeps you in position throughout the exercise, because with every passing moment in an exercise, fatigue setting in, and you're losing life quickly. So the only way to counter that negative pull is to, in an extreme way, aim at something that's actually impossible. Okay? So what you're aiming at is to make every single part of your body a solid piece of steel. All right? The only parts of this machine that move are the elbow joint in this case, and the scapular humeral joint, an AC joint. Okay. In this case, because we're doing a chest press. Those are literally the only two moving parts in the exercise, not even your fingers. Okay. So I know this sounds extreme, but this is an exercise in thinking, and it's a way to use analogy to externally focus somebody with imagery. This is how you maintain the structure of an exercise. This sounds like a lot, but this is something that within 2 to 3 workouts will become intuitive. And if you know how to set it up, you'll never lose it again. All right, so this video might be a little long, but listen up. So again, sit back in the machine, make sure that your feet are about hip width apart. Now let's just say, you know, the seat of this machine is high enough off the ground that your feet are dangling. Get a stool so that your feet don't dangle. We want contact with every part of the body, needs to be in contact with something. I used to think otherwise when I was into super slow. You kind of want the legs nice and relaxed. No, that's going to leak energy. We need to find solid contact points with every part of the body so that the body can become truly a rigid system. All right. Now, it becomes rigid only due to the external load demand. It needs to be that rigid for that reason. If we're talking about something with a much lighter loading, like throwing an object, for instance, the body still sets up in a skeletally sound way, but you're relying more on relaxation, and then at the last moment, a violent concentric contraction to whip the arm through, for instance, right? So, but the heavier that ball got, let's say that ball eventually became 500 pounds, your entire system from feet to fingertips would need to become more rigid in order to support and create a strong lever against that heavy ball. All right. So, strength training, we're using maximal load. So we're talking about an extreme case of down the motor continuum here. This is a situation where we're trying to create rotation at a few joints, and just like the machine, if you had any part of your exercise equipment that was forgiving, you would not get true rotation at the axis. It would wobble inside of the bearings there, and the articulations of the machine. You would get wobble. Now, again, think of this on an order scale. It's meant to explain something, not to be literal. Okay, and people also need to learn to take a joke sometimes. But anyway, so you have this order scale. At one end, there's an extreme load, all right? And the other end, there's no load. Now, the closer you get to this incredibly heavy load, the more rigid the system needs to be in order to create movement at the desired joints, pure movement at the desired joints, unhindered movement at the desired joints. In this case, we're looking for exercising the musculatures that are directly responsible for movement of that joint. And for them to do their job, that joint axis needs to be moving in a fixed way, and there needs to be enough rigidity in the system that when that musculature contracts, it can create pure rotation at that joint. All right? So we're talking about sending energy in a particular direction. And when you are exerting in an exercise, you're sending it in a positive direction. Every part of your body needs to be sending energy in that positive direction. Think of this as like a narrow tunnel of energy, right? You do not and cannot afford for that energy to start hitting the sidewalls, start wobbling outwards, all right? Your entire objective is just like in Star Wars, Luke trying to blow up the Death Star, is to aim at that small point straight ahead and drive all of your energy, all of it, in that direction. I mean, you don't have room under heavy weights. You don't have time to even allow a slight mental lapse that would start letting it kind of go haywire. Again, every second that goes by, your intent has to get stronger, stronger, stronger to go in the direction you're trying to send the exercise. All right? This is just a neurological fact. Again, this requires a lot of concentration, and this is one of the things that I'm trying to teach. And it sounds very heady, but it's really not. It takes very little time to actually learn it in practice. So you're going to be alarmed after I'm done with this, how simple this exercise is, considering all this verbiage I've used to lead up to it. Anyway, let's get back to the exercise. So, sit in, feet straight ahead, knees straight ahead, feet maybe hip width apart. What I want you to do is whatever surface that your feet are in contact with. I prefer the floor because it's flat and broad, and I will often train without shoes on. And you're going to start by using your feet. This is something I've learned from, again, motor learning and other forms of, baseball development, things like that. When you're learning to produce ground force, you want to use your foot like it was designed, just like your hand is a gripping tool. So is your feet. So are your feet. So you spread your feet, spread your toes, and grip the deck. Grab the ground like you're trying to ball it up, like a towel, or like you can ball up the ground in the bottom of your foot. The contraction force from that will start to send rigidity up the spine. All right? Start to send that energy upwards. So you take that rigidity and you build up. Go to the knee next and make sure that type of rigidity exists from the knee to the foot, and then go from the knee to the hip. Set your pelvis up so that your pelvis is neutral, hopefully, meaning we don't want an extreme anterior tilt or an extreme posterior tilt. We want it so that you're basically sitting on your ischial tuberosities, your sit bones. So from there, again, you have the grip, the deck gripped with your feet. You're producing that force, and then you're now making your lower leg and your thigh rigid. So what I want you to visualize here is if someone were to come from the outside of your legs and try to drive your knees inwards, or go from the inside out trying to drive them outwards, like a time static hip adduction, abduction. If someone were to come by and try to do that, you would not let them. All right? They would be unable to move you because, again, you're supposed to be a solid piece of equipment. All right? So whatever force they apply, you are countering that with an equal amount of force so that the system's rigid. Okay? Again, this is analogy. I'm not saying people actually do this. I mean, I do this with clients to instruct what I'm talking about. So, if you're an instructor, use it. But anyway, so you build up, you get to you're at the pelvis now, and now what we're going to do is create a contraction with the gluteus maximus. Not a maximal one, just enough to make sure that the pelvis stays where it is. All right. When the pelvis is in the correct position, our spine is now sitting on top of the pelvis in a way that we can elongate it properly and make it into the solid steel pull that it needs to be able to support the exercise. All right. So now we're up to the spine and the rib cage. All right. What we're going to do is to think of the body as a tank, and we are going to learn to fill that tank up with air from the inside out, because that pressure, PSIs, create tension throughout the system. So we're essentially building a steel frame and then inflating it from the inside out with air pressure to make it even more rigid. Okay? So I want you to think of your rib cage now, because if you're sitting down and looking at yourself from the side and your rib cage is really tilted in one direction or the other, your spine, your lumbar spine, is going to be in an extreme arch or flexion. All right. So what we want is for you to kind of position the rib cage so that if you viewed it from the side, it would be straight up and down. Okay. Now we're up to the shoulders. We'll take the shoulder blades, pull them down, back and together with some light retraction, and kind of use the back pad there to keep them kind of pinned together. We want to, depending upon the chest press we're speaking of, but this goes to most generic chest presses that are just moving horizontally, not like the Renex ventral torso where there's spinal flexion involved. I'm just talking about a regular chest press here. Shoulders will stay depressed down and back, and they need to remain locked there. Okay. There is going to be some movement. You don't want to inhibit the movement of the scapula, but you need to keep enough rigidity in the area surrounding the shoulder there, so that as you press the movement arms forward, you're not going into protraction. All right. So we're building back, we're building up. We have tension in the lower body by gripping the deck. We're squeezing the glutes. We're arresting any forces that might make us move in and out. And now when you get to the trunk, to keep the rib cage where it is, you're going to create an abdominal contraction, a light abdominal contraction, enough to make sure that, again, if someone were to come in and start to apply force and try to move you, you would be able to build up enough force on command to arrest it and not let it happen. All right. So now we're at the shoulder. We keep the shoulder locked back, rigid. Slight lift to the sternum, but not enough to really interrupt what your rib cage is doing. Just enough to remind you that it should not be slumping. Okay. Well, now the arms, 30 to 45 degrees from the torso is probably the best position for the shoulder to be in. Don't flare them straight out to the side. But whatever angle of abduction you've attained with them, again, just like the example with the thighs, pretend that someone were to come by and try to do like a manual lateral raise with you at your elbows, and you're not letting them push you up or down. All right? It's maintaining that angle, because again, we're trying to basically block off doors around the body that would let energy start to leak outward. We're trying to create a strict hallway here. All right. So now we're at the upper body. Elbow, grab the handles, and contrary to what you may have been taught, you are going to use your hands, and you're going to squeeze the piss out of those handles as the set gets more intense. At first, you're going to contract the hands just tight enough, like you're grabbing, I ask people to think of a sponge for whatever reason, more so than like a can or anything else. Trying to wring out a sponge is a better visualization that elicits the correct action. Again, this is all stuff from motor learning. All right, the type of imagery we use has a profound effect on the physical outcome or the physical expression. All right, so thinking of a sponge, in my experience, has been more advantageous than any other type of object you could think about crushing. Oh, and by the way, analogies for the buttocks and the abdomen. I often tell people, think of pinching a coin between your butt cheeks and trying to maintain that coin in that spot throughout the exercise. With the abdomen, again, I say pretend someone's trying to push you back and forth and your abdomen's rigid, or, you know, pretend that you're getting punched in the gut. There's enough of an abdominal contraction that you could absorb the punch and maybe hurt their hand. Okay. The shoulders, the best visualization I like is to tell people to take the back of their shoulder and put it inside of the back pockets of their hip. And again, these are things that what we're building right now, once we begin the exercise, there will be no negotiation. You are spending time right now to build the exercise up, to build the structure of the exercises up in such a way that you do a systems check before the first rep. You make sure everything's rigid, everything's in place. There's nobody not doing their job. Everyone's ready. And then when we hit the go button, everything in the body starts to contract with an intent in one direction. So everything's participating in that one direction to keep energy going straight ahead. Right? That's the type of visualization I want you to think about. Okay, so let's get back to the hands now. So the hands are gripped around the handle, and the reason you want to squeeze them is because making that fist will keep the wrist rigid. Again, so now that you have a unforgivable lever for force to travel this way, up this way, blah, blah, blah. All right. And now the head and neck. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, really, it's just a chin tuck. All right. And I tell people, think of the chin as the lock button. You've set everything else up, squeezed everything in place, and now you're pushing this button to lock it all in. All right. That's it. You are locked in and ready to go. Now, until you become adept at learning how to increase the participation of this rigidity with each passing moment in an exercise, you're going to define task failure as the moment when, despite your greatest volitional effort, you are unable to maintain the lock. All right. This sounds extreme, but if you do it correctly, it will only be for a workout or two before you get it. All right. The point is, we need to make sure that the primary postural task of the exercise has no building flaws. Okay. We want a completely solid building. Now, again, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying, although you'll find this does produce a better result. I'm not saying this is absolutely going to create like more muscle mass or anything like that. I think it's silly when people like that. I'm talking about a better way to do the same thing you're already doing. A way that has more intention and deliberate setup. And if you put that type of time into what you're doing, psychologically you're already in the space of paying attention better. That's why going through an exercise in this way is valuable. It's valuable because you're setting up a ritual and a habit that will make you foolproof. You'll be able to look at each workout and go, I don't have to question how hard I was pushing today. I'm a robot. Like, the numbers tell me. And again, this is an attitude that is easy to teach people. It's simple. Okay, so to not teach it is, in my opinion, a little bit lazy. All right, so sorry for the rant. Now we're going to get to what we're going to do with your breathing. All right. I want you to get everything in place. Take your eyes and do not close them. All right. At an advanced level, I think some people prefer to train with their eyes closed, and that's a preference, and that's fine. But from a strict motor learning perspective, you are increasing the coordination demands of the task by closing your eyes. By shutting off your visual perception, you're shifting the balance of stress now to another system, the vestibular system. And although you're sitting in a machine and you're really stable and there's no fear of falling or anything ridiculous like that, the closing of the eyes is compromising the efficiency of your motor system. All right, so what to do with the eyes? In general, the best thing to do is to find a point that is directly straight ahead in a position that will maintain your head and neck posture. So, you know, if the machine's reclined and your head and neck's here, you know, you find a spot on the ceiling. All right. The idea is just to find one spot to start to collect your attention around. Now, when you found that location, head, what you're going to do is then stare at it, okay, for about 10 seconds. And every time you notice your eyes start to move off it, you kind of just bring it back there, right? It just takes 10, 30 seconds of practice when you get the point, right? From there, you're going to start to expand your vision outwards so that you're able to see not clearly, but you're using your peripheral vision to take in the entire scape of the entire room. This creates what's called an open focus form of attention that is, in general, much better for more automated motor performance. Okay. The reason for that is because it's not constricted on one spot and it's not like gunking up the system, so to speak. Staring at one particular spot tends to increase rumination in the brain. So does closing the eyes. So we want to avoid, if at all possible, being in a type of attentive mode that blocks things out, contrary to what you think. All right, we're not trying to block anything out. You're trying to pay attention in almost such a broad, inclusive way as though you're driving a car. You know, you don't concentrate just on the shift, just on the, you know, the brake, the gas, the wheel. There's a bunch of things that you're taking into your attentional scope as you're driving a car. And the broader your vision is, the better you're seeing all of the traffic. Whether you're looking at it directly or not, your brain and your nervous system are aware of a greater number of environmental variations, okay? And because of that, your motor system is now making the task more efficient, okay? Now, an argument at this point from a lot of people may be like, well, we're trying to not make the motor task inefficient. This is exercise. We're trying to make it hard. And my response would be, again, that's silly. Why are you fighting what your motor system's trying to do? No, you build muscle and make musculature work harder and increase motor units by increasing the demand of the task externally, by adding load to a task, letting the body try to become more efficient with that, but you're countering it with a greater level of resistance. Trying to control and consciously make the task less efficient is regressing a motor skill. It's keeping you in an infantile stage of motor development with that particular task. So we don't want to intentionally move slowly. And this is something I'll go into another day. That doesn't mean the speed of motion won't be generally slow, but we don't intentionally do a concentric slowly. To do so is to work against what your brain is trying to do. Instead of leveraging your systems so that you're sending energy and effort in the correct direction, you're constraining them based on some fangled notion you have about fatigue and tension. All right. So, getting back to the task at hand. Again, your attention wanders just like it does here, where I wander off into a million diatribes before I get back to the point. This is the landscape of meditation, people. So you're staring ahead, taking in the entire scope of everything around you. And now you make sure that your eyes are still. And again, you start breathing in deeply. So you're going to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. With each breath, you're trying to inflate your trunk, your tank. You're trying to take every space in your body and fill it with air. And during the exhale, you feel it contract a little bit. And then on the next respiration, you push it out against the sidewall some more. And then you let it relax a little bit. And then you do that maybe one more time. So I have most of my people take 3 deep breaths to kind of set the entire system in place, to do a systems check, to make sure everything's in place where it needs to be and it's ready and good to go before you start the exercise. And that all of your attentional systems are on the lookout now, so that it's looking for those errors. It's looking for the first thing to move out of place. And with time, if you keep practicing the exercise with this level of attention, it's awesome. You become like this weird observer thing that is able to watch all this crap going on at the same time, and in an instant decide to just send your energy right back in correct direction, right? When you teach someone to do this, if you're an instructor and you're sitting there talking to them, you're going to screw them up. All right, so be careful what you say. You want to say things that get them back on the track of paying attention to what they were supposed to. And the only way you know that is if they are consistent enough with their setup that when they start to break down, they give a tell. And that's when you learn to instruct. All right, so if you're doing your teaching correctly, you are witnessing social pressure for them. All right, you are the thing that is invading their personal space, getting their motor unit recruitment fired up, because that is what happens when people are around other people. All right, we are social animals. So we've taken our 3 deep breaths. All right, and on that third breath, I say I want you to maximally inflate the tank, keep it tight, all the air pushing out against the sidewalls of every space in your body. Again, this is an analogy. All right, so take it as such, use it. Don't think about this literally. So you're tight. All right, everything's tight, and now you're going to squeeze the handles a little extra tightly, a little tighter than they were before. Make sure everything's rigid. You're going to start to gradually exert force on the movement arm, and while paying attention strictly to the movement of the movement arms in your peripheral vision, you are going to compress air out of the system and drive the movement arm to the end point, with the intention that the moment it gets to the end point, you are on a dime going to be able to freeze so it doesn't wobble even a little. Okay, having that intent ahead of time is important. It's called destination cue, and having the objective of getting to the end and not letting the movement arm wobble like a lightning rod at all, but getting it to the end and having it just be completely stark still for a split second. What you're doing when you get there is you're proving that you had control over the repetition, number one. But number two, by thinking about it ahead of time, you are informing the motor system what it needs to do to accomplish that task. And what it needs to do to get to that point from A to B is not what you want to be thinking about during the repetition. You need a clear goal that is setting the motor system up to do the correct thing. All right. So again, you're kind of looking in right straight ahead at one spot, but again, everything all at once. You've taken your 3 deep breaths. Your third one's held, and now you're going to literally just compress air out of the system and drive the movement arm to the other end. So let me demonstrate. Okay, simple. And I know what a lot of the HIIT super slow people are going to say. Blood pressure! You're holding your breath, Valsalva! Everyone freak out, okay? Look, if you understand what I've taught you here, you understand mechanically this is the only way to go, all right? Yes, you breathe out when you lift and you breathe in when you lower. There's a reason that's common advice. You can't breathe freely during an exercise. And in contrast to what I just taught you, trying to breathe freely under a heavy load is like trying to push that load with an empty trash bag. You're just flopping around, okay? And that's why when you watch a lot of like high-end, like super slow type of training with people, is they get squirmy over the end for a number of reasons. One, they have the time to, because they're intentionally moving so slowly. Two, that intent produces a ton of unnecessary fatigue that winds up interfering with what they're supposed to be paying attention to. They're responding to that, they squirm more. Now they're just hanging in there, trying to hit some point called failure, looking like they're pushing as hard as they can, but really they're kind of balking. They're just kind of holding on for dear life until this whole horrible event is over. That's different than having an intent of driving in a particular direction. Okay, so just kind of briefly touching on the negative there. What you do during the negative is you inhale through the nose to a count of 3. All right, a slow 3. 1, 2, 3, and you keep that. And now you count that in your head. All right, and the reason you're going to count is the same reason we teach counting in Zen training to beginning meditators. I'm trying to ask you to focus on something physical and focus on your respiration, which is also physical at the same time. I need a thread to tie those two things together, and that's what counting does. If I count my breathing, I am now also paying attention to positive action, concentric contraction of the musculature, and then paying attention to my inhale, I'm focusing on that's opposite, right? That's how the human body coordinates respiration and movement. You learn this in yoga, martial arts. No activity is exempt. The mistake is thinking that exercise is a special form of human activity that doesn't apply to those other forms of human activity. That could not be further from the truth. Exercise is a skill, and I hate to inform some people of that. A minor one compared to like juggling or balancing or any other sport, but it's still a motor skill that you have to learn, as I'm mentioning. And the reason is, the heavier the weights get, the greater the coordination demands get. And if you to some degree aren't learning to pay attention to your structure of the task in order to improve that coordination, the heavier the weight gets, you're going to erode over time. So this is the reason why I use analogy like this and have people train in a way that might seem extreme at first, because it seems extreme, but you're aiming at something that's actually kind of impossible. But you have to aim that direction, because if you don't, again, you're bleeding fast. You're going to get pulled the other way. And many clients get into a habit of where they learn what failure is. I've seen it over and over. Both the instructor and the client know it. No one says anything. No one ever talks about it. It's like this bad traumatic event that happened, and no one's just going to ever talk about it again. But you'll see this spot where after a few months of training, client gets to real failure for the first time. And you see this weird look of panic on their face during the exercise. And then for many people, it's over then. I mean, they might continue to come to the studio for 10 years, but they never push that boundary because of that horrifying experience. And it wouldn't have been horrifying if they had skillfully learned how to get there by paying attention to some more elementary things, right? And that's my point. Learning to set up your structure, focusing on your breathing, keeping your mind attentive on certain things, makes the discomfort of the exercise background noise that you learn. It's just something that's there. It's not something to fight at all. This is not a tough guy thing. It's what are you paying attention to versus what are you not? So to kind of sum this up, again, simple. 3 deep breaths, inflate your system, keep it tight, compress air out during the positive. However long that positive takes is dependent upon the load. So don't use super light weights or it's going to go really fast. Get to the end, freeze for a second to make sure that you had control of it. Begin to inhale through the nose, and as you continue to inhale, that inhale kind of does the negative for you. It's inflating. You're counting to 3. It's this big, huge, buoyant balloon at the end, supporting the load. You hold for just a second and then compress it out again. Inhale, inflate. Really simple. And it works. And again, if you understand biomechanics and the motor learning side of things, and now the psychological side of things, you'll see why it is incredibly important to do these things and why it takes really no time. It just takes a little practice. And when you get it, you're locked in. Your client's locked in. Every single one of my clients trains in the manner that I just demonstrated for you. And the point is, I would want to show other people off the street that. Look how they're behaving. They're doing something insanely hard. And I will tell you, if you've never done a set in the way that I just kind of demonstrated, and also realize as the set fatigues, as the set goes on, you're doing more reps, you're starting to fatigue. Every passing second during the concentric, you have to get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, and you have to squeeze out more and more and more and more air. So every negative is going to require a deeper inhale. So you're inflating deeper, squeezing out harder, inflating deeper, squeezing out harder. And I will tell you, if you have not done this before, you don't know what failure is. All right. Until you have learned to push to the limits of what's truly testing the rigidity of your structure and learned how to not fail with your structure under that, you don't know what true task failure is. Only once everything has been summoned all at once at one convergence point of failure, everything participating is no longer able to continue. That's task failure. And everything should be participating in unison with one another. That's task failure. And it takes practice to do that. It takes learning to leverage your respiration and these other neural mechanisms to truly drive it out. So even if you've been training to failure for years, if you've been doing so with the kind of the free breathing method and keeping everything relaxed, you haven't truly experienced task failure. You've experienced horrible stuff, very, very uncomfortable exercise, vomit, nausea, lightheadedness, hyperventilation, like you just got the crap kicked out. You've experienced a lot of stuff, don't get me wrong. But it's not true task failure. And I'll leave it at that. All right. So again, sum up real quickly. 3 deep breaths. Inhale through the nose. Exhale forcefully through the mouth. You're compressing air out. Continue to deepen your inhale. You're trying to inflate the system to make it tighter and use that air to squeeze out the positive. Okay. Again, take this as an analogy. Don't take it as literal. I'm using things to connect things here. Okay. I recommend that everybody count deliberately during the eccentric from 1 to 3 to control and standardize the speed of negative. Not because there's magic in 3 seconds. I don't give a shit if you do it in 4 or 5. The point is, attach a focus point to the breathing so that you're focused on the breathing and on the negative at the same time, and not on the rumination in your head. When you get to this bottom, shut off that air valve for a second, keep it all compressed in, and then start to squeeze it out. Now, as you squeeze out the positive, what I want you to do is attach the number of the repetition that you're on to the entire, in your head. It's like you're taking, for instance, if this is the first repetition, the entire time I'm exhaling, I'm taking a paintbrush and coloring it with the number 1 the whole way out. I don't stop counting that number 1 until I'm at the top and I've shut the air off again to get ready to inhale and do the next negative. All right. So there isn't a point in the exercise where you're not covering your attention with the counting. All right. This will prevent you from, not prevent you, but this is how you train your mind to not wander all over the place during the exercise. So again, if you're of the HIIT super slow ilk, much of what I said completely contradicts everything that you've been taught. And it should. That's all for now. Al at automatedmuscle.com. Automated Muscle on my Instagrams. This was a long one, but, I gave it away for free because practice. See what happens. I'd love for people to benefit from it. That's the whole point. So anyway, contact me on my social media. I work with people in this manner. So, you know, if you're struggling with it, with, you know, practicing what I just showed you, I've got a million tools in my bag, from my years of training and my years of, meditating, that can help you get your attention back on track during a workout. So, you know, when I work with people specifically, if they're mentally struggling with somebody, they'll point that out, and I will come up with something analogically to work around and improve that technique flaw. All right. And again, don't take the technique flaw as being anal retentive. We're using the technique flaws as practice focus. Okay. It's giving us something to cultivate alongside the given physical benefit that we're already getting from the exercise. If you truly want your clients to do exercise for a lifetime, they need to be imbued with this type of skill. They should be able to go on vacation and get great workouts without you. You should be teaching them how to not need you. That doesn't mean they won't, but that should be your intent. So, again, signing off, rambling. Al at automatedmuscle.com. Contact me if you want to work with me. I program in 12-week blocks, and we go over all of this stuff, as well as a very, very objective path over 12 weeks, where I guarantee at the end you will be different than when you started. Again, contact me on my social media, DM me if you're interested. Signing off. Take care.